going on at the present time. At the moment we have a titanic struggle going on of the rail workers who are campaigning for at least a cost of living increase in their wages. But equally importantly, they're campaigning to defend their working conditions, their pension entitlements, and the numbers of people that are employed on our railways. The government puts out a statement saying they've had a decent pay offer. They haven't. But the government also says the deal is completely acceptable. No, it's not, because we will have driver-only trains, we'll have less staff on stations, and we have the safest railway system in the world at the moment. We won't have if this government and these rail companies, all of whom are privatised, manages to get away with it. And we also have a huge struggle by the Communication Workers Union, which is organising the postal workers around the country as well as telecom workers. They've won their battle for decent wages for the telecom workers, but the postal workers are still very much in dispute and are now re-voting for more days of strike action in January and February next year, on top of the many days of strike action they've already had. We filled the whole of central London on Friday with postal workers. They even went to see the King at Buckingham Palace. He wasn't home, but he must have got the message. It is, after all, Royal Mail. Sadly, it is privately owned. But again, if they get a decent pay offer, good. But they're also threatened with huge job losses and the deconstruction of what is a properly organised, properly employed workforce with lifetime contracts, pensions, and everything that goes with it. And they will turn it into a gig economy on the basis they have to compete with the privatised, competitive mail systems and remove the public service obligation, which means that Royal Mail must be able to deliver a electoral package to every single address in the United Kingdom. This is a fight back against the neoliberal agenda that privatised railways and privatised the postal services. And, many health workers will be taking industrial action for many of the same reasons. Pay, understaffing, and again, our wonderful National Health Service. Health care, free as a human right at the point of need, is being undermined and damaged by privatisation of the health service and threats of forcing people into the private health sector. I want a health service properly funded, fully publicly owned, with everyone employed by the National Health Service, not by American companies. And when I raised this spectre during the general election, I was told I was speaking on behalf of Russia. Yeah. This is what the Conservative press said, that I was actually putting forward Russian propaganda by opposing American companies running our health service. That is the banal level that most of the British media have descended to in a refusal or failure to discuss any serious issues. And at the end of January, they'll be joined by the teachers who are balloting at the moment to take widespread industrial action. They are also campaigning for decent pay and conditions, but also against the over-testing and over-stressing of so many of our young people, which has led to a mental health crisis amongst many school and university students. Our proposals were for free university education and a national education service with free education as a right from cradle to grave, irrespective of your academic abilities. We have to be the movement for education and excitement, as well as all the other economic issues that we deal with. But on all the picket lines and all the demonstrations and all the marches that we're having in Britain at the moment, please come and join us if you can. Please join in. But you know what? It's young people coming in as well. Those campaigning against homelessness, those campaigning for decent quality housing, those that are campaigning to support the food banks and all the mutual aid groups that have sprung up all over the country. And so we have to organise together on a political agenda, management economics, where one party says we manage the economy X way, and the other one says Y way. It's not an alternative. It doesn't inspire anybody. There has to be a process of redistribution of power and wealth in our society, and understand the massive power held by big banks and global corporations that destroy and dominate the economies of smaller countries, and indeed attempt to dominate and destroy the voices of the labour movement all over Europe and North America. We have to be united and very, very strong and very, very determined in the message that we put out to get people to support a left alternative, because they won't hear it in the mainstream media. And there is an alternative to this. Cap energy costs. Take into public ownership all the energy companies, and in my country, all the water companies. It's also opposing the proposals by right-wing governments such as the one we have in Britain to restrict strike action, to restrict trade union action, to threaten trade union organisation and trade union funds. Why do they do it? Because they're frightened. They're frightened of the power of the organised working class linking up. Yes, those at the workplace, but also those in social justice campaigns as well. And that is very much the message we're putting forward. But we've got to face it. Many unions tend to represent public sector workers or older industrial workers rather than young workers. We have to recruit the young generation into trade union activity. Those working for Uber, Deliveroo, Amazon, Starbucks, all those companies that operate within a gig economy and so exploit young people. Those are the young people that need a message of solidarity and hope, because they're growing up in an atmosphere where they're overcharged for education, overcharged for housing, underpaid in wages, and going through often many terrible levels of mental health stress. So we have to be a left movement that reaches out and inspires people. You don't achieve political change just by economic argument, and as your message quite rightly says, it's bread and roses and music and art and enthusiasm and culture that's part of our culture. And that means how we communicate with people. We have the illusion that social media gives us access to everything. At one level it does. I can pick up this phone and I can access information all over the world. I even read the version on social media of Marxism the other day. I disagreed with most of it, but at least it was there. Well, I didn't disagree with Marxism, I disagreed with the interpretation, I should be clear. What we have to do is develop an alternative media, and in the Peace and Justice Project we're establishing news clubs all over Britain in towns and regions where we challenge the news media and the news values that they use. The idea that they do not report on minority ethnic communities, they do not report on issues facing Africa, Latin America or South Asia. On internationalism, they have an obsession with the United States at the expense of all else. And it's those sense of news values that often disempower people. We need to work together. I look forward to working together with all the comrades in this room on how we can develop an alternative news system. We shouldn't be reliant solely on a few American global corporations to decide whether we can communicate with each other. It is dangerous. At the high point of the Indian farmers' dispute with the government of India to try to stop the neoliberal agenda on Indian agriculture, what happened? Those companies all cooperated with the Modi government to shut down access to all social media platforms for the Indian farmers. That's the power they have, and that is the danger that is there against all of us who want to put forward a radical socialist alternative agenda. Yesterday was International Human Rights Day, and my government, the British government, is proposing a British Bill of Rights which will withdraw Britain from the European Convention of Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights, and develop their own rather strange idea of what human rights is as defined by Boris Johnson or his two successor prime ministers. It is a very, very dangerous proposal indeed. We are fully behind defending international human rights standards. Human rights standards which have given us a great deal and given support for people who are fighting against oppression in many situations. And working with many comrades in the Council of Europe and elsewhere, we have fought very hard battles to try to get good statements and good positions in support of refugees and their right to asylum in any country in Europe. The pushbacks in the Mediterranean, in the Aegean, in the English Channel, against desperate people trying to seek a place of safety will go down in history as the darkest days of human rights in the 21st century. Those dangerous vessels and dangerous dinghies, there are people trying to get to a place of safety and make a contribution to our lives. Those people risking their lives to cross to get to a place of safety will be tomorrow's teachers, tomorrow's doctors, tomorrow's engineers, tomorrow's comrades, tomorrow's neighbours. Can't we oppose the far right and the nasty, narrow, fascist agenda that they put forward and reach out to human beings wherever they are trying to get to a place of safety? They're victims of wars all over the world. They're victims of the terrible war in Ukraine, which must be stopped. There must be a ceasefire, and Russia must be condemned for the invasion. But there has to be a process of peace. Likewise, there has to be a process of peace elsewhere. There are 41 wars going on around the world, most of them barely reported. The war in the Congo, the wars in many other African countries, the occupation of Palestine, the war in Yemen. There are so many other conflicts going on. We need that strong global movement for peace. Peace comes with justice. Peace comes with stopping the mining companies exploiting the natural resources of the world. Peace comes from an agenda of sustainability and respect for human rights of women, men, young people, old people, and those with disabilities. But it's very easy to be a council of despair. We've had pushbacks, we've had setbacks across Europe. In my own country, I'm very, very aware of that. But there is hope. Brazil, I was there for the last round of the presidential election. The coalition, the left coalition that got behind Lula's campaign did not go into triangulation and clever tactics. It put forward a working class agenda, united, it worked for homeless, it worked for Bolsonaro had, Lula's campaign managed to win. And we have hope in Colombia with Petro winning. We have hope in Chile with Boric winning. We have great hope from Mexico where AMLO had that massive victory a couple of years ago. It's those victories that give us hope. But be aware of the dangers of lawfare. Look what has happened in Peru. Look what has happened in Ecuador. And look what's been attempted many times in Bolivia. And so it is that global understanding we have to have. Not a Eurocentric view of arrogance towards the rest of the world, but a whole generation brought up understanding that our art, our culture, our music, our maths, our science comes from every part of the globe. Bring up our children to understand global history as well as national history. That will give us hope. It will give the young generation hope. The only thing we have to avoid is our own internal despair. What we have to do is be united. Agree on the fundamentals of economic and social justice. Agree on the fundamentals of peace and disarmament. Agree on the fundamentals of environmental sustainability. Agree on the fundamentals of a human rights agenda. And we've got a coalition basis on which we can gain massive support for the future and deliver for the next generation a safer, cleaner, greener world of opportunity and full employment, not one of a mental health crisis, despair, and a disgusting gap between the richest and the poorest. And the only thing conventional economics can offer is trickle-down economics, neoliberal privatisation, excessive profiteering, and an ever wider gap between the richest and the poorest, sustained by oppressive policing measures, sustained by a right-wing media, sustained by racist arguments. We, on the left, as socialists, have the alternative. Let's make sure everybody hears it. Thank you very much.